This is the installation of the TX9000 and 9200. First off, you'll notice that the system is now clean from the front and the back. There's a lot of attention to details in a lot of different areas, so it's important to notice really where some of the fits are important, and just the eventual leveling and installation needs to be clean. This is not 3000. One of the things I want to recommend to the installers is we need to understand the installation of the TX9000 is a bit different than the 3000. And so if you are familiar with the 3000 and how it installs, please pay special attention to the video and what we discuss, because you'll find that the installation will go much smoother with some of this new knowledge. The placement of the three main structures doesn't have to be perfect initially. What we want to see is the structures to be reasonably leveled, so that when you install and attach them together, that things will fit quickly. If they aren't very well leveled, you'll have some difficulty in getting these to assemble. So pay some attention to the leveling right up front. Then once they're all assembled, we will move them into the final position later on. Right here is where you're going to notice the leveling is very important as you attach this tie bar to connect the two structures. Having these structures well leveled to each other will make this process go very quickly. The upper tie bars, please note that they are side specific. They'll be labeled. They'll indicate which side they're to go on, but you will find the installation could have problems if you're installing the wrong ones on the wrong side, so please make note of that. Notice the screws are loosely installed. This is important to make certain you can easily level all the structures to each other. Once you get them all level to each other and it looks good, go ahead and tighten them all down. Notice they're placing brackets on the floor. This is for the freestanding wall installation. If you are installing the wall-mounted reflector wall, you won't see these brackets installed. Now is the time to do the fine adjustment to the position off the wall. This position should take into consideration fire codes and position of wall outlets to make certain that you can plug your equipment in effectively and be able to remove it effectively in an emergency. Please note if you have a wall-mounted reflector wall, you will have a bracket down to give you a gross position off the wall. Please make certain that you pay attention to the installation guide and place the structures so that they're located at the correct distance off the wall. Here they're checking two marks: the vertical alignment off the wall position to make certain the structure is in the correct location, as well as the horizontal line of the structure to make certain that everything is leveled properly to each other. The structures have been properly leveled. Now it's time to go ahead and tighten all the screws to lock the structure in place. We'll do some more leveling later on once the displays are hung. The structure tends to sag a little bit as the weight of the displays pull it down, and you'll see some more leveling later on. We're showing the installation of the freestanding reflector wall right here. You'll notice that the displays are missing. We do recommend in the installation guide to hang the displays first and then assemble the reflector wall. We decided not to do it here just so you'd have good viewable access to the installation of the reflector wall. You have yours. Make sure you don't fully tighten the nuts as they're installing these arms. The reason why is we want to make certain we have some room to move these arms up and down. You'll notice there's a bit of a gap in the panels, and that allows us to move this arm up and down just so it's finally leveled with the structure. One of the reasons we recommend to install the reflector wall after the displays have been hung is you'll notice right now the reflector wall will be rigidly attached to the structure. The reflector wall will resist your ability to finally level the main assembly structure with all the displays. So please make certain that you hang the displays first before doing the final leveling. Here they're vertically leveling the reflector wall using the telescoping arms and getting a good position, then finally locking it down with the screws attached to the arms. The leveling of the reflector wall is an important step to make certain the reflector panels are all in proper alignment once fully installed. Make sure that when you are leveling the frame that you don't level it too high or raise it too high off the floor, otherwise the C-channel may not properly hold the frame base in its position. Make sure you level the reflector wall panels to each other first before you fully connect them together. There's some dowel pins that need to be properly aligned before you can do the final connection. Now would be the time to remove the access panels in the reflector wall frames if you need access to the outlets behind it. This would be also a great time to double check your building codes to make certain that you are not violating any access limitations. Align the panels in numerical order, starting from the left. They're numbered 1 through 5. Access panels just from this side, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Don't forget to install the L bracket on the base as well. This improves the overall structural rigidity of the reflector wall and improves the reflector panel leveling and alignment. Please make sure you leave the displays in their packaging while you are removing the handles, just to avoid damage to the display. Make sure you don't lay the displays flat as well. Here is one major difference between the CTS3000 and the TX9000. Make sure you fully tighten the spools on the displays. We won't be using these for any final adjustments on leveling, so make sure they're fully tightened before you assemble the displays to the structure.
We've already seen one set of close-ups.
Well, that and this one. It's hard to tell, but the bridging pieces that bridge the structure to structure, those will have a little jog, and that allows you to move things. Now this is where the final leveling takes place. Ideally, the reflector wall is not attached at this point, and you're able to level the structure with the displays being fully hung. Another major difference between the CTS3000 and the TX9000 is that the displays for the CTS3000 do not include these mounting attachments for the bezel brackets. So you'll notice that right now we're installing the bezel brackets using the screws provided by the display manufacturer. As a reminder, you cannot use the CTS3000 displays on a TX9000. When installing the center speaker assembly, make sure the rotating brackets on the left and right edge are flipped inboard prior to installation, and then when it's fully installed, go ahead and flip those to the connecting brackets adjacent to the center bracket. When installing these bottom bezel brackets, make sure the flange fits in between the bottom brackets that are hanging on the base of the display and the display itself.
We're all in it.
Twist and then now tighten with an exit and step them. Actually, you can catch her both fronts if you want, and then we can do the backs in a second.
When installing the vertical bezel, go ahead and remove the 4 existing screws from the center display and attach the attachment brackets to the center display to tighten the vertical bezel. For some of the equipment, we've provided keyhole slots on the brackets, so installing some of the screws partially will aid in the installation later on. Make sure you check the installation guide to identify the correct bracket. There's a left and a right that attach to the codecs, so make sure that you install the correct ones. That will give you the proper orientation of the codec. It's important to keep these in their proper orientation so the fans have plenty of room to bring in cool air and exhaust the hot air out the top.
That was luck. Yeah. Coming down to his screw. I didn't know he was going to screw.
Coming up to his hanging it and coming back.
Here's why we keep the screws loose. You can see that we have keyhole slots in the brackets, and this provides a great guide and makes the installation a lot easier for these brackets. Make sure you put the correct power supply in its correct slot.
Continue. Anybody from your team wants to say it? I think so. I think there's 4 total, and then the 5th one's at the table.
Using the install guide, please observe the proper orientation of these electronic components. This will aid you when we get to the wiring and cabling section later on.
especially the fact that the extension mold's on the left side.
What I'd probably
Most
do,
of the time, the cable chuck's on the right.
what I'd probably do then is I would,
Cable mold is good. Extension mold is get a little bit longer cable, so let's just put it on slow on the right.
I thought it was a pretty good quote.
yeah, you just need to do that.
Yeah.
Or right. You just don't want it.
So basically, you just, for the Cisco and Cisco's, they would have
Once again, we're using keyhole slots to aid in the bracket installation, so make sure you keep about 5 millimeters of distance between the top two screw heads and the structure itself. Also, as you're installing these brackets, please push the bracket all the way up to the base of the display. This is important in some final leveling steps later on.
no, where I tried Sean on that. Pointing out
Now this is a very important step. We've provided some alignment features on the bracket so you can see exactly where the line should be. So make sure you have good vertical leveling on all three brackets. This is very critical as we'll be installing facade parts to these, and good vertical alignment is essential in making a proper fit for the final facade assembly. A quick tip would be to level all three to the lowest hanging bracket.
You ready?
That makes more sense because that one's slotted, Jason.
Yeah, I just thought the top coming down would snap into that.
A spirit level is great to use for coarse leveling. To do any final leveling, make sure you're using a laser level, both for the side brackets and the back brackets as well, to make sure that you have a good level line from the front all the way to the back.
that's true, actually.
So there's really nothing. And then again, we have diamond holes on every single leg.
And for the first third, you've got that cable drop.
The reason we use hex bolts for the camera bracket assembly, so you can really get a nice tight turn on these bolts to get them rigidly fastened to the structure. These hold the camera, and it's important to make sure that they're not going to move around. At this point, loosen the top screws and slide the top bracket so that the rubber pad rests against the display, and then tighten the top screws once you've done that.
Nice.
So how can we level silver for all the dress up stuff?
Their VP.
Each leg is specific in its position, so make sure that you identify the correct leg and place it approximately where it may go in the install. Also, reference the installation guide to make sure that the feet are approximately at the right height right from the start. Loosely install the screws for the center structure. It will be helpful to peel back the edges of the protective coating prior to installing it to the structure.
10 seconds this time. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, we got the PDU cable through last night. Okay.
To perform the initial leveling of the table structure, go ahead and pop off the black plastic panels as well as the aluminum panels on the table legs to give you access to some of the leveling features as well as the leveling feet themselves. Just make sure when you place the panels on the carpet that there's nothing there that could mar the surface. The table structure has cutouts that allow the laser level to shine through to the main structure. So use the laser level both to align the table structure, but to also align the table structure to the main structure as well. Once the table's been fully leveled, go ahead and tighten all the screws down, both between the legs and the structure, as well as the structure and the cable runner. Please note these bridge pieces do have right and left orientations, so make sure you pick the appropriate one to align the far right and far left legs. Go ahead and pull out the panels now on the left and right leg and get a nice final level, both horizontally, vertically, and front to back. This will give us a great base to place the tabletops on. Remember, leveling is very critical in the success of a good final installation, so make sure you put the right amount of time to level the table legs here so that later on you don't run into trouble. We're using the same lap cons as the 3000. One thing you'll notice here is that the installation goes onto a plastic part that then gets assembled to the table legs. So the assembly should be very similar to what you see in the 3000, just with a few minor differences. The network cabling can be installed after the plastic panel has been assembled to the table leg, or you can do it before, either way.
Yeah, kind of move around in your hand, just like that. Perfect. Great.
Where does it go?
Yes, we did. We did. We did. Get it started, and then I'll move in close there.
Please refer to the installation guide for proper wiring paths to isolate your grounds from your power, just to make sure you have good system functionality. Dang it. Following the correct paths for the cables is important to isolate signals, as well as for keeping clean impedances on the cables themselves. The other thing we provided is a cavity for excess cable, but please make sure that when you coil the cable up that you provide generous radii. We don't want to bind or crimp or bend any of the cables in any unorthodox manner. When handling or installing panels, please make sure to avoid sliding your hands up and down. The edges can be sharp. We want to prevent injury. The flange on the bottom of the table structure acts as a ledge for the bottom bracket of the panel. Once initially installed, go ahead and press on both sides of the panel and slide it down. You should see a nice continuity from the table panel to the center panel. On some of the initial systems, field labeling may be required. Proper labeling is critical for full system functionality. Make sure to follow the installation guide for proper cable routing.
We're gonna have to track them all back on here, but goes to the top. It's a little slow.
We've provided an upper ledge for the signal cable routing that can quickly be installed and tucked away.
This one's gonna go touch panel to the front. There's four. This one goes straight across. After the table structure has been checked for level once again, the table installation begins. Notice the tabletops will be placed a bit offset in order to give you good access to both the top and bottom hardware that gets assembled.
His last name.
Biscuits are now inserted to the table edge, and the tabletops are joined together. We'll have clamps at the bottom that will clamp the two tabletops together. Make sure you have one person holding the tabletop together so that it's perfectly aligned while the bottom clamps are tightened. Don't fully tighten the clamps until you can verify the top is perfectly aligned.
nap time in. Are you kidding me?
I love to go things.
Go ahead and repeat the procedure on the opposite end. The final step is to align the tabletop to the table legs. Use the back two holes in the table legs as alignment guides to match up with the back two holes underneath the table. Don't fully tighten any of the screws until all have been started.
Prototype design is not great. Trying to get there.
The first plastic part has already been installed, you'll notice. Make sure you sandwich the presentation cable in between the next plastic part that will get installed and close it off.
Where it just terminates into that and then out. So we wanted to come up with something that actually on the design we did, it's actually pretty. I agree. Yeah, that's engineering 101. The more gadgets you have,
When aligning and installing the cable guide, make sure the Cisco logo points away from the display, or another way to look at it is that it's pointing at the participant. When placing the second plastic bracket, please make sure the Ethernet cable for the Cisco Touch device is sandwiched between the second bracket, and then that assembly is attached to the structure.
I brought that up in a meeting today, and they said they haven't gotten that feedback. No. Yeah, I'm talking about for solar flare. They haven't heard any feedback.
Any bigger than they are for the existing 3000, they're gonna have problems.
Yeah, but they didn't get that feedback. So I'm giving it to the
Solar Flare team.
Solar Flare team did not get that feedback from Solar Flare. Although I talked to Matt about it in the hall, and he's like, "Yes, it's having the same problem. After your experience, and
Give Jason and I 5 of these, and we'll get done.
okay. So you think an experienced team can do a single row system in 2 days? Two in 2 days.
So great to be the
From this view, notice the Ethernet cable comes out the top and the presentation cable comes out the bottom. When installing the microphones, place the microphone cable through the hole in the table. Go ahead and screw in the microphone using the provided screws, and then connect the microphone cable to the appropriate connection. Use some of the flanges provided on the underside of the table bracket to tuck away the cables and keep them nice and clean.
As far as being able to function.
This is now a good time to verify that this bracket has been fully screwed to the table underside. Once you've verified everything has been screwed in and connected properly, go ahead and reattach the panels onto the table structure and the table legs.
No problem.
Oh, actually, 1 second.
Please note when installing the panels on the inside of the table structure and table legs that this inside center plastic panel needs to go on first, then go ahead and apply the left and the right inside panels. Use the screws provided to install the table cable covers.
No laughing. You know you're in the time lapse, right? Oh, it's going? Don't I go? That's it.
For proper orientation of the cable cover, the screw holes are on the table side and the slotted keyhole is on the display structure side. Please be aware of the displays in the table as you are lowering this piece into place. Go ahead and pull back the protective covering on both ends and slide the cover underneath the keyhole feature and attach the screws at the table end.
Pull that plastic back a little bit. I'm ready for you to do everything. You can do the other finger. Right here. Oh, you found the ball?
The final two panels are installed using the hinge provided. It just rotates and closes with ball snaps. The top panel uses the same hinge design and the magnets attach it to the top. Prior to connecting the Cisco Touch device and retracting the cable into the cable guide cavity of the table, please make sure you have approximately 8 feet of cable both for the touch device and for the presentation device.
But do you see that even has a solid movement? He's showing the parts and everything. You got your SAG card, man?
Assemble the ball sleeve to the audio and video cables to consolidate the connectors for ease of use. Now is a great time to double check your level of the table, make final adjustments if necessary. If using a laser level, it may be helpful to darken the room. The left and right back covers install fairly simply. There is a bracket that hangs towards the base of the panel. Make sure you've got that supported well, and then go ahead and let it drop down. Make sure the left and right sides are pushed in, and then loosely tighten the screws. We'll do some final adjustments later on when the top bezels are installed. Remove the knockouts cleanly in the back panel, only in the case of a freestanding reflector wall. These provide clearance for the reflector arms. Adjust the back panel so it's centered between the left and the right panel. You may need to move it back and forth just to get that final adjustment. Installation of the top panels are fairly simple. Please go ahead and grab the connector for the light bars and snap it into place, and then make sure the tongue fits into the groove of the back covers as you assemble it down onto the structure. And then go ahead and make sure you slide it into position.
Yeah, just sits there.
Does this go inside? Yeah, there you go.
Go ahead and follow the same procedure for the left and center panels. Please note that the center panel does have two connections for the lights, so make sure you attach both.
Get enough slack in the cable so you can go in straight.
Exactly, I noticed the rivet, is it the rivets or the, okay, that's why.
No?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Now once that's done.
Plug the cable of the light bar into the connector on the structure, and then be careful that you don't pinch the light bar cable as you rotate and snap the light bar into place. The back cover service panels simply snap into place with ball studs. Prior to the installation of the back left and right facades, it will be helpful to pre-install the adapter brackets, making sure you install them on the non-slotted sides of the holes.
Yeah, it'll be past some sign.
Installation of the back facade panels is fairly simple. It's a two-step process, positioning and then fastening. We're showing the positioning right now. The panels are positioned with the guide of an alignment pin. Just make sure that the panels are fully seated before you let go. Please note there is a left and right base bracket. Please make sure you have the correct orientation prior to installation.
Balance though, what of your stuff I should add to the video and what I think
The final aluminum panel for the back is the center. Prior to attaching the assembly together with the nuts provided, don't forget to install the screws on the left and right ends. These are necessary to firm up the structure on the facade itself.
There you go. Thank you.
It'd have to be the same 6 7.
Yeah, they have to go.
I put my hand on the drills in my hand. Ready?
Assembly of the nuts is from the front side. Make sure you assemble and tighten all nuts for a nice, firm structure. Pre-install the two screws for the display bracket, allowing for a few millimeters of gap. So when you assemble the bracket, you can use the keyhole slots provided and let it hang in place. Once that's installed, assemble the two screws from the top and then tighten all four. And now would be a great time to check that the appropriate connections for the data display are readily available. Prior to attaching the center front facade, make sure the tether is in place so you can assemble it to the structure later on. Being careful not to scratch any displays, lower the center facade down It hangs on a base and then rotates and snaps into place.
You can do that one right now. Yeah, you'll
Using the base of the packaging as a support, attach the data display bracket using the 4 screws provided. The data display hinges and rotates into place. Prior to final assembly, go ahead and attach the connections, secure them, and then rotate the data display and secure it using the 2 captive screws.
in the back.
Just so you know. Oh, this is an outdated display. The fabric bezel assembly is simple. Just make sure you snap all ball studs into place as you assemble it, starting from right to left. Now would be a great time to adjust the back panels to make sure you've got great alignment between the back panel and the front fabric bezel. The bottom fabric bezel is the same. Just make sure all ball studs are firmly attached. Rehang the reflector panel and then go ahead and secure the reflector arm cover plates. Hang the remaining reflector panels to finish the assembly. Verify that all lines are uniform across the seams. If not, you may need to remove the panels and readjust the level of the structure if necessary. When placing the opacity foams on the camera lenses, make sure you place them beyond the first set screw of the lens itself.
Okay, you can go ahead and take off that middle.
Attach the camera cover using the 4 captive screws. The front cover simply attaches into place using magnets.
Okay, go ahead and remove that.
The back cable runner cover assembles into place using ball studs. The final step of installing a TX9000 is to remove the protective films on all metal parts. In a second row installation, it's important to place the legs in the approximate locations, but please note the labels on the legs. This will help you identify where to place them because they are location specific.
So can you guys just...
Now's a great time to check the height of the feet. Please reference the installation guide and the height that is recommended. Remove the plastic panels in a safe location prior to doing all of your leveling of the base. Attach the back panels to the legs using the guide pins and loosely attaching the screws.
Yes. In the wide shot. Yeah, just give me 1 second.
As in the front table of the TX9000, the back table requires a good level before the tabletop can be installed, so please make sure each leg is both vertically and horizontally level and an adequate distance from the front table. Please note the vertical leveling of the table legs for the back row is a bit different than the front. We've provided a wrench for the feet to be able to adjust the level up and down. When you're satisfied with the leveling of the table legs, go ahead and tighten all the screws down. Using the same process as the front row, attach the lap cons to the plastic panel and then take that assembly and attach it to the table leg using the screws provided. Place the power distribution units in the appropriate locations and then fasten using the nuts provided. When dressing the cables, notice there are 3 partitions for power, Ethernet, and audio. Power will be on the bottom, Ethernet will be on the middle row, and audio will be on the top row.
Reggie, can you give me some Velcro?
Attach the appropriate audio cable to the appropriate connection in the audio expansion box. Depending upon whether the cables have been trenched or they are going over the carpet, select the appropriate cable cover box. You'll notice this particular box has a cutout on the side to add relief for the cables. If it's trenched, you may not need that and you can select the other box. And then once this box is installed using the 2 screws provided, tighten the cables a bit so you don't see any labels and it's nice and clean. Lay the mic extension cables in the top row of the back panels and then make sure that your level is still consistent and good. Make some adjustments if necessary at this time.
We're almost there on this one.
The second row tabletop installation is identical to the first row. Just make sure when you place these on and you bias them that you have adequate access to all the hardware you need to install.
Record?
Yeah, you're good. You should just ask them to stop for a little bit. You can ask them to stop for a bit.
Because if they're doing that, then 10 should be okay.
Can you do that? Thank you. Just want to get a shot of that.
Installing the microphones in the second row is very similar to the first row. Make sure when you feed the cable through on the top, come in from the bottom side and take the cable connection, and there's a notch in the wood itself. Slide it through that notch so that it goes into the front side of the back panel.
Individually upgraded, there's quite a bit of extra stuff.
When all microphone cables have been routed all the way through, go ahead and connect the microphone connector to the extension cables. Just like the front row, snap the cable covers for the microphones into place. Please note the modesty panels for the second row are specific in their location, so make sure you check the part numbers prior to installation. The modesty panels will first rest on the brackets of the table, and then you want to take and slide the panels up and press in on both sides to make sure that you have a tight fit. And then go ahead and add the screws right at the base.
Yeah.
So this actually is my business partner.
Now it's a great time to do some final position checks. Make sure the second row is in place according to the installation guide.
All the opposite, yeah. See what that's at.
Yeah, so it's pretty much the CTS shape with a lot of the T3 finish. Okay. To it. Yeah. And it was almost 50%. Like some of them said I like this, other people said
Yeah,
they like
5/16 is close.
people that had the T3, they
Between
still
5/16 and 3/8.
it doesn't have the big screen.
Well, the other thing is, like, you know, I like the color actually of the maple better, but I think this is
Existing, colors of many companies, whereas that
exactly.
it's almost a proprietary color.
For one final check, make sure the tables are level to each other and that everything has a good final check.
I can't believe it hit it that good on the first shot. That's pretty good. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the maple can flash easily.
The last step in the assembly is to remove the protective films on all the metal surfaces. You've just finished the installation of the TX9000 series, the next generation immersive endpoint that supports the future of business collaboration.
Here's an example of a complete system already been added and fully functional in our environment, where the MAC address and description and region and other information has been filled up according to our need. Protocol specific information, fill the necessary information as shown in a previous clip as well. In the product specific configuration layout, here's some information you may need. The quality of the video, contact your admin, which is the best fit for your test. 60 frames per second is default. You can choose 30 frames per second in main. You can make the necessary changes here. For the presentation output device, either is the projector or the display. By default is projector/display. Here is the setting for directory lookup. If you have an alternate directory server where you have all the directories, you can add here. This is the information for the recording server where you can record. These are the default. After that, this is a remote login for the CTS endpoint. And this external CTS log destination, this is something you can contact your admin again to find out where the information will be pushed, or the logs can be pushed or saved dynamically or on demand from the CTS endpoint. This information can be filled here and configured here. System will send logs every day, depend on your configuration. These are the options you have: once per 3 days, once per week, once per day, never. These information can help for debugging issues.